Welcome to Session 79, Salesforce Sandbox Creation. Before any code, configuration change, or deployment reaches production, it goes through a sandbox. Understanding how to set up the right sandbox for the right purpose is a fundamental DevOps skill in Salesforce development. Sandboxes are isolated copies of your Salesforce org. Some contain only metadata, some include data. They give developers, QA teams, and release managers a safe environment to build, test, and validate without any risk to live production data or users. The developer sandbox is the starting point for most Salesforce developers. It gets 200 megabytes of storage and copies metadata only, no records. It refreshes every day, which means if something goes wrong, you can reset quickly. Every org includes at least one developer sandbox allocation. Developer Pro expands storage to 1 gigabyte while keeping the same metadata-only copy and daily refresh cycle. Use Developer Pro when the 200 megabyte limit becomes a real constraint, typically in orgs with large numbers of custom objects, dense Apex code bases, or extensive metadata from managed packages. Partial Copy Sandbox gives you 5 gigabytes and can copy both metadata and a defined subset of data records. Refresh cycle is every 5 days. This is the right environment for QA and UAT. You get real data to test with, but you control exactly what comes in through sandbox templates. This is what most quality assurance and user acceptance testing should be running on. Full Copy Sandbox exactly mirrors your production org. Same storage, same metadata, same data, all of it. Refresh cycle is every 29 days, and creation can take 24 to 48 hours depending on org size. Full Copy is reserved for performance testing, load testing, and the final validation step before a major release. It is expensive in terms of time and org resources, so use it intentionally. The sandbox name is the decision most people make without thinking about it. The name you give the sandbox, maximum 10 characters, becomes the suffix appended to every username in that environment. If production is admin@company.com and your sandbox is named dev1, your sandbox login is admin@company.com.dev1. You will type this name hundreds of times. Choose something short, meaningful, and easy to type. To create a sandbox, go to Setup, search for Sandboxes, click Environments, then Sandboxes, and click New Sandbox. You'll see a creation form asking for the name, type, an optional post-copy Apex class, and for partial copy, a sandbox template. The sandbox types available to you depend on your org's license agreement. Enterprise and Unlimited editions include more sandboxes and sandbox types than Professional. If a type is grayed out or unavailable in the creation screen, it is not included in your current license. Check your contract or contact your AE before building a workflow that depends on full copy if you're unsure whether it's included. The post-copy Apex class field lets you specify a class that runs automatically after the sandbox finishes creating. This is useful for seeding test data programmatically, deactivating scheduled jobs that would fire in production, or setting environment-specific configuration values, API endpoints, feature flags, or custom setting values that should differ between production and sandbox. Sandbox templates apply to partial copy sandboxes only. A template defines which Salesforce objects are included and can include filter criteria for which records to copy from each object. Configure templates and setup under Sandbox templates. A well-designed template gives your QA team a consistent, predictable dataset on every refresh without pulling sensitive production records unnecessarily. In Setup, go to Sandbox Templates and click New. Add the objects you need, accounts, contacts, opportunities for a standard CRM test, for example, and set criteria if you want to filter by record type, owner, or date range. Save the template and reference it when creating or refreshing your partial copy sandbox. Without a template, Salesforce copies up to 10,000 random records per object. Email deliverability is one of the most common sandbox configuration mistakes. Salesforce automatically appends that invalid to all email addresses copied into sandboxes, which prevents outbound email from reaching real inboxes. The default deliverability setting is system email only, meaning Salesforce can send you admin notifications, but your flows and Apex triggers cannot send emails to users. Change this to all email only when you specifically need to test an email delivery workflow end-to-end, and change it back when you're done. After sandbox creation is confirmed, 3 immediate steps. First, log in and verify the environment looks correct. Is metadata present? Did the post-copy class run? Second, check environment-specific settings, named credentials, custom settings, and remote site settings that might still point to production endpoints. Third, configure your CLI alias so you have a consistent way to target this sandbox from the command line. To connect via CLI, run SF org login web. Pass the alias flag with a short name you'll recognize, and pass the instance URL as HTTPS, then your sandbox name, .sandbox.my.salesforce.com. Once aliased, every subsequent CLI command can reference this org by alias. SF project deploy start, SF apex run, SF data query. All target the sandbox without re-authenticating. Pay attention to named credentials and custom settings that reference external endpoints. A common error is leaving a sandbox pointing at a production external system, a payment processor, a third-party API, or a middleware endpoint. Each sandbox should have its own version of any environment-specific configuration, pointing at sandbox or test equivalents of external systems. Sandbox refresh strategy depends on what you are using the sandbox for. Developer sandboxes refreshing daily is rarely a problem. Partial copy refreshing every 5 days means you can reset to a clean dataset frequently during a sprint. Full copy at 29 days is a constraint. Treat full copy refresh dates as a release planning input, not an on-demand option. Scratch orgs and sandboxes serve different purposes. Scratch orgs are ephemeral developer environments, typically used with SFDX for isolated feature development. They are not based on your production org and do not contain production metadata unless explicitly pushed. Sandboxes are copies of your actual org. They're better for testing in context. Use Scratch orgs for clean, isolated development. Use sandboxes for testing in a realistic environment. Common mistakes. Choosing a sandbox name that's over 10 characters. The field truncates it silently. Picking full copy when partial copy would do. Wasting the 29-day refresh cycle. Leaving email deliverability set to all email in a QA sandbox and accidentally sending test emails to real users. Not setting up the CLI alias and having to re-authenticate every session. That covers the full sandbox creation process: type selection, naming, templates, post-copy classes, email configuration, and CLI setup. The complete guide with commands is at realsyllabus.com/Salesforce. Session 80 continues with sandbox refresh, the options, the caveats, and what happens to your changes when you refresh over an existing sandbox.